Hi, I'm Chris Brogan. I'd had a question asked of me about some tips and ideas on how to do a better interview and what constitutes getting people out of their comfort zones for an interview. What can you do with that? And actually the question came from one of the hosts of the really interesting baby boomer show, mompoppow.com, Diane Brogan. Oh yeah, that's my mom. So one of the things I find in interviews, and I'm fortunate enough to give a lot of interviews on one side, and on the other side I get the opportunity to ask people for interviews and be the the host asking the talent a question. One of the things I think people do that I would do differently is they start at the beginning. And that works really great in movies to sort of establish a scene. But the other way to do it is what we call in media res, start in the middle. And so, for example, you might see people who do really great interviews do something like, you got the book published and then you had to really sell it to the audience because it wasn't a typical kind of book. How did you start convincing people that this was the right kind of book for them? Well, that's way different than where did you get the idea to write such and such a book? This is the kind of question that will really get somebody from the middle of the story that'll give you a better sense of who they are. One of the other reasons of starting something in the middle is that you can have the opportunity to understand a little bit more what the person thinks, like how they think, what they do. For example, asking a question like, if you were the person who's brought social media to this company, what were some of the challenges you faced and how did you overcome them, is a great way to get somebody to give you some real guts and meat on a story. When I had the chance to interview Tony Hawk, the professional skateboarder, for his book, Well, How Did I Get Here?, it was a chance for me to start not from, hey, you're known as the guy who did a lot of skateboarding, so now what? But I sort of went right at the angle of, there seems like there's a lot of, for every person who loves him, there's a hater. For every person that hates him, there's somebody who just can't get enough of him. And that he really did a great job of covering that in his book because he would publish letters from both the people who liked it and people who didn't like him or whatever. And that gave us a nice, interesting angle to start with. If you're going to interview someone that you don't know anything about, if you've been thrown into the situation of interviewing somebody that you don't know anything about, some of the questions you can ask that will help you move forward are ask them about their passions. Ask them about what's the thing that really gets you excited right now. At the end of a horribly long day, what would actually get you going again? What would make you move? And if they say something totally off the cuff like beer, say, oh, no kidding, what kind of beer do you drink? Don't ever worry about if it went way off the base of what you were going to go with. Go right into whatever they talked about, because here's the hint: if they've started and opened up a door, you might as well pursue it a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. Never stick to your questions 100%. I don't know how many times I've been on the catch side of an interview where somebody's interviewing me and I give them something that you can tell I'm really passionate about and they've reacted to it, and then they go, okay, and then look back down and then ask me the next question on their list. It's hard because sometimes the story doesn't go where you intend it to go. And sometimes if an interview is all over the place, it's tricky. But believe me, the parts where you get the good stuff is usually in the roads less traveled. Another great way to figure out how to do better interviews is watch more interviews. Watch what people like Oprah Winfrey do. Watch Larry King's old footage. Watch some of the people who are doing great interviews out there. Look at some of the different styles of interviewers. Look at what William Shatner does on his show. It's kind of creepy because he gets really close to you. There's a lot of great interviewers out there doing interesting ways of interviewing. Start stealing some of their tricks and putting them into your own context. Read Esquire magazine's interviews. Every month they have an incredible interview. The most recent one was Liam Neeson. And some of the questions they asked and how they asked it were great. Rolling Stone, same thing. There was a great interview in there from Tom Chiarella, and I'm totally and utterly blanking on who he interviewed, but it was somebody, pretty legendary. And what I loved about it was that whole sense, or maybe that was the interview with Liam Neeson. It was the whole thing about making sure that you go from a really interesting storytelling kind of angle as well. Notice something about this video I taped. Notice that I leave in the throat clearings, the speech mistakes and all that, the scratching. Interviews can be raw. That's another beautiful thing about them. They don't have to be polished. If you're willing to do a little bit of editing, then you can always slice in the parts that you need, but try really hard to keep the conversation going. One way to do that is always think in your head the way improv people think. Think yes and that might help you as well. This is a few tips on how to do good interviews, and we'll give you a whole lot more. I'm Chris Brogan at chrisbrogan.com.